Welcome everyone, and thank you for joining us. We are thrilled to have you here at the webinar led by one of our gold partner, AMI Praha. They are a system integrator operating in the ICT security segment that specializes in authentication, authorization processes, and access control to information regardless of the place of storage. AMI Praha has been integrating MidPoint into their customers' IAM infrastructures since 2015, and they operate in Czech Republic, Slovakia, and can deliver services across all European countries. And before we dive in, I would like to extend a special welcome to our speaker, Martin Lízner, the Chief Solution Architect at AMI Praha. Martin has got over a decade of experience in ICT security, and during this webinar, he will walk us through how one of their customers successfully migrated from an on-premise HR system to the SAP, all powered by MidPoint. I would like to give words to Martin now to get us started. Thank you.
Thank you, Simona. Again, my name is Martin Lízner. I work at AMI Praha as Chief Solution Architect, and today's topic will be about HR system in one of our clients, the HR system of SAP SuccessFactors. Okay, let's start. The agenda is as follows. I will talk about a bit of the process of changing the HR system in existing MidPoint deployment. Then we will dive into more technical aspects and talk about the connector, API, and these sort of things. And also, I will mention some unique MidPoint features that really helped us in dealing with multiple contracts per identity in HR. And at last, we can discuss some performance aspects in integrating this cloud-based HR system. At the end of my presentation, there will be plenty of space of questions. So if you have any, don't just wait till the end and ask me anything. It's no problem. Let's begin. So the customer is Fortuna Entertainment Group, or just Fortuna in short. So what does the Fortuna do for the living? They have a betting business in multiple world countries. It's mainly in Europe, and since they deal with the customers' money, they have to have strict security rules, and they have internal, external auditors, etc. So my topic for today is about Fortuna migration from old proprietary HR system that was applicable only for Czech Republic to cloud-based SAP SuccessFactors HR. That's a single HR system for the entire Fortuna group. Okay, next slide. Okay, first lesson we learned that is changing HR system in existing MidPoint deployment is quite costly. It's not like adding a new target system or changing existing target system in your IDM. When you change HR system, that is your authoritative source of identities. It implicitly means you have to change a lot of existing business logic in your deployment. It starts with a data model, of course. New HR means new data model, new user attributes, but those user attributes are at least here at Fortuna are needed to be changed on the target systems as well. So, for example, when we change HR system, we of course we kept existing Active Directory that was already integrated with MidPoint. But I remember that we had to change for about 10 to 15 user attributes in the schema handling in the Active Directory resource. That's just one of the examples of the impacts. Of course, we had to redo and rethink the identity lifecycle, like the events of identity creation, disable, maternity, and these sort of things. They were also present in the old HR system, but in the SuccessFactors, they had to rely on a new status attributes. They had to create new safety periods and these sort of things. And also the new HR came with new features that were not simply present in the old solution, like multiple contracts per one identity or future contracts, meaning that a single identity can have one main contract, and then maybe in parallel they have another contract, or it can be a future contract that has a validity in the future, and so on. So we have to implement these new things as well. Also, another supporting processes or side processes that you wouldn't normally imagine, but they were also impacted, like email notifications, authorizations, or even reporting. So to sum it up, when we change authoritative system in existing IDM, barely. I mean, we have to touch almost every part of MidPoint. Next slide is about the actual process of migration. So in talking about the production environment, what we did, first we kept the old business logic. I mean, all the object templates and resources and these authorization, notification, etc. We all kept it in the old version, and we started to link those new HR accounts to existing identities. Luckily, we had one common identifier that was both applicable for the old HR and a new HR. So we used that attribute as a linkage, but we were not sure if it's 100% correct. So we linked those accounts, and then we ran a couple of reports, and we let the customer to check it if all the new HR accounts were correlated or all right. After we had that certainty, we changed IDM business logic for the new one. So that was a big thing. And we still kept the old HR accounts linked, just as a fail-safe. So either we can compare the data if we are unsure, or for the reason that we still have a rollback possibility. So then we again ran all the checks and simulations, and we made tons of like previews on user samples. And once we were sure, we were ready to write the data to target systems. And after some time, that's the last point, we were confident enough that we won't need any rollback, and we finally unlinked the old HR accounts from identities. So these were the gradual process. Yeah, and in the middle of it, we had both HR integrated with IDM, but only one business logic was effective in a given time. Okay, next slide needs no words. It's a screenshot from the SuccessFactors in Fortuna, and they call it Sheldon. Knock knock, Penny. I guess it's from this show, Big Bang Theory. Yeah, or maybe not, I don't know, but I like the name anyway. So it's quite, I must say, I don't work in it, but from what I had the opportunity to see, it looks quite modern. Maybe the main thing you can see in the top middle, that this employee named Jan, he has actually 2 contracts here. Yeah, that's important part for us. One contract is that he's a group IT infrastructure architect, and the other contract is that he's a services manager. So this is the SuccessFactor already customized for Fortuna Entertainment Group. Now let's dive in for the more technical stuff, API and the connector. Our starting point to build a connector was Rakau connector, and let me thank them again for making this SuccessFactors connector public. Thank you. The good news about SuccessFactors API is that it's a RESTful web service. It's built on JSON. We like JSON in integrations. That's cool. By the way, the API of SuccessFactors is called OData. But the good news and here, the API of SuccessFactors is very complex. Actually, you need to work with multiple entities. They need to be queried and joined together in a single query. Even authentication to their tenants backend is quite complex. This is actually what the picture on the right side is about. It's all these lines and all this. It's just about authentication mechanism. For example, they use OAuth to authenticate, which is normal, which is fine. But in this OAuth process, you need to construct SAML token, and then you get a session token, which you have to reuse and validate. So even the authentication part took us many lines of code to make it working. And on top of that, each customer can customize SuccessFactors. Maybe that's why it's so popular service. But it doesn't make us make the work for us easier, because the data model can be different in each SuccessFactors tenant. Talking about the proprietary connector, Rakau connector reads user entity. Our customer, Fortuna, they needed to synchronize contracts. That's AMP job entity. As I said, one person can have multiple contracts. Each contract can have their own validity, or own organizational assignment, own manager, etc. So we couldn't use that part of Rakau connector, and we had to build it from scratch. That logic of reading the data. What I usually say to our developers when they begin with a connector, I tell them, ideal connector does not contain any business logic. It should be ideally a simple pipeline that just pushes the data from left to right and maybe back. Yeah, but unfortunately, we had to resort of implementing some proprietary business logic to this connector. We had to make some special like additional queries inside the connector, for example, for future contracts or for some disabled identities. That's not really a business logic. It's not that bad. So just single query from MidPoint gets translated into two or three queries. Okay, it just slows down the thing, but that's not the worst thing. The worst is that we had to implement some workarounds to combat the behavior of SuccessFactors. For example, as I was speaking about the contracts, if employee has a current contract and then there is which gets terminated eventually, and in parallel there is a future contract, the SuccessFactor may or may not recycle the contract ID for this future contract, and so we cannot fully rely on the contract ID in a vanilla fashion. So we had to implement a workaround which consists of business logic that compares employees' contracts and is evaluating the contracts and is saying, okay, this contract it has a priority because it's valid and it's future compared to the current contract which is already terminated. So that's kind of, and it would be extremely difficult to implement this in MidPoint. So we had to put this business logic into the connector itself. I'm not very proud of it, but there was no other way how to do it. And our connector is capable, and we are updating certain attributes from MidPoint to SuccessFactor, like username and email that we generated in MidPoint. We are pushing back to SuccessFactor. The picture on the right, yes, that's the actual that's the actual query we have constructed. Yeah, it's mostly some attributes name from really different entities of SuccessFactors. There is some magic word called expand, which actually is joining those entities into one element of data. So really we had to work hard and fine-tune this query until we found it. Yeah. So and last thing about the proprietary connector, and I'm very sorry for this. I myself has published some connectors to GitHub under Evolveum namespace, but I cannot publish this SuccessFactor proprietary connector. It just contains too much of the logic. So, but you can always use and start from the Raco connector. So I'm sorry for this. So that was for API and for the connector. Now let's move to the MidPoint features, which helped us a lot. MidPoint, most of you know, has a support for multiple contracts. They call it multi-accounts. So it works like this. You can see it on the picture that one person has actually two projections, two accounts linked to this Sheldon HR system. Yeah. So it can be 2 accounts, 3 accounts even. And then there is one attribute which we get from SuccessFactors, and this is called is primary assignment. And this attribute tells us which of those 2 or more contracts is the primary one. And then in MidPoint's identity, we only take data from this single primary contract. The other contracts are just waiting there, being linked, and they are waiting to be switched on in the future, maybe. One unpleasant thing about SuccessFactor, that this is primary assignment attribute, which tells us which contract is primary, is not 100% reliable. It happens once per month, maybe once in 2 months, that this attribute is stuck on a terminated contract, and there is another, let's say, future contract which should be primary by all means, but the API just stubbornly returns that the terminated contract is primary. So we had to make some lookup table overrides in MidPoint, so it can be set manually. But maybe in the future we are discussing with the customer and thinking of that we will move this logic that tells us which contract is primary from HR to MidPoint. I like it more in HR because HR should have theoretically more data, or at least the same data or more than MidPoint to decide which contract is primary. But here, since it's not 100%, we may have to move it to MidPoint. I'm sure MidPoint will make it. What difficult part is to really analyze this logic. Okay, so multiple contracts. By the way, this multi-accounts feature, since some newer version of MidPoint, it also works for target systems, for outbound systems. You can have multiple accounts of I don't know, maybe in Active Directory, not just authoritative HR system. Okay. So the thing about the performance of SuccessFactor backend, it's to put it mildly, it's not ideal. As I said, we have to make actual 2 or 3 queries to get a single contract, and it can take up to 1.5 seconds, one get operation of one contract. It's way too much, and we have put in a lot of optimizations in the connector. There is a connector pooling, then we recycle authentication sessions so we don't have to use OAuth frequently, etc. But that's it. It's a cloud service, so there is no leverage how to tell them to make it faster or whatever. No. But there is one prospect which keeps some optimism. In MidPoint 4.9, there is a feature called shadow caching. and it can read the data from any endpoint, let's say using the reconciliation task in a bulk mode. In a language of the connector, it's a list all query. And we have found out that the SuccessFactors API is actually tuned for these bulk queries. It can read thousands of contracts in minutes. In contrast to reading single account in 1.5 seconds. So the idea is we can have a for example a reconciliation task that would read all the contracts and fill the shadow cache in MidPoint every, let's say, 4 hours. And then we can have, if there is a necessity to work with a single account and have a single get operation, read operation, we can maybe rely on that cache. That's maybe the idea if our customers will one day say it's just too slow. Okay. To sum it all up, I would say if you change in existing deployment your HR system, it's quite costly. It's not like changing target system. You have to redo many of MidPoint processes. Especially for SuccessFactors, it's quite popular HR, I must say. We have more customers that are having this or are interested in getting this HR. But probably the software is nice, but the API is over complex. If you need to do it, start with Rakow connector. Maybe you can contact me on a MidPoint mailing list or directly if you are already in the development. I can give you some hints. But the API actually it's complex, but it's doable. You can there is everything you need in the end. You will just make it. Good thing about MidPoint, it totally supports multi-accounts, multiple contracts per one identity. The performance of SuccessFactors API is bad in querying single account. That could be an ideal pattern for shadow caching because the bulk operations are fast. So that's the conclusion. Thank you for attention.